Hello, everyone. Welcome to Let's Address Texas. My name is Saadia Mirza, and today I am joined by Erika, Black Girls Who Brunch. You guys might follow her on different social platforms. She is an attorney, content creator on Instagram, TikTok, I believe all the places. How are you doing today?
Doing okay, doing okay.
And I want to thank you for your time today. I'm really big about making sure I don't overtalk communities that are hurt or affected. And I know that this week was particularly a tough one with the verdict for the Karmelo Anthony case, especially with the Black community. And I just wanted to one check on you and two see if there's anything you would like to share with communities that may not already know.
Mhm. Uh, it's funny, and right before you messaged me, somebody just kinda misconstrued my thoughts or my feelings about this case, and, they were like, "Well, you're screaming that he should be free, and he should be free," and I think my thing for me, I'm an attorney, but I don't do criminal law, and I think the big thing for a lot of us, we notice some of the inequities in our system with this case. A lot of attorneys I've talked to, also Black attorneys, our thought process is like this case was overcharged in our opinion. They did not humanize him. They didn't think about him as a child who's not fully developed. The reasonable person standard that was applied here was that of an adult or a 50-year-old or 40, this is putting us full-grown adults who live some life in the situation, and how we would have handled things at that age may be different. That was a piece to it to me, and then also just the sentence. I felt like there was just no humanity given to him in that. And so, of course, the jury had no one Black on it, and sometimes that the jury had no one Black, the attorneys were not Black, and sometimes it takes us to be able to humanize, and tell our stories because others don't always do that for us. And I think about the humanization of him is one of the big things issues I have with this. And then, just how these kind of cases become this like people see them as like wins and losses. People see them like they kind of approach it like we're rooting for a
Mm.
FIFA team. We're rooting for our country to win FIFA. And these are lies, not just Carmelo's life, but his family, the victim's family, his twin brother, all these different things. And I just feel like the win and loss kind of mentality to this is just not a realistic way to approach our criminal justice system. And so for me, like I said, I really have been honing in on the inequities here. A really good case to compare is like the Amber Geiger case out of the Dallas area, it was in Dallas County, I believe. But Amber Geiger walked into the wrong apartment and shot and killed a man, and was charged with manslaughter, and then ultimately gets like I think a 10-year sentence. And so, arguably, there's enough evidence to go for first degree murder there, but they didn't go for first degree murder for a number of reasons. And so I think about stuff like that, and that's part of my personal frustration. And I think this is long, but this is all my feelings about this. But one of my friends always continues to say that the Trayvon Martin case was a really pivotal case to him in terms of how these cases move when it comes to self defense. Who's entitled to self defense? Who is entitled to defend themselves? Who's entitled to all these different things? And so the Trayvon Martin case, he always talks about is like this blimp in the timeline. That if the decision there is different, if George Zimmerman is found guilty, then we see these things approach differently as well.
And I completely hear you and I understand you. And when the verdict dropped, I think there was already this feeling in my gut because I think there was a gag order. I just the whole thing kind of I think some of us already saw where it was going. So the first day, all I did was amplify Black voices and those communities that were hurting. I felt like that was the only appropriate thing to say. The next day, I did have some thoughts, and I had shared them in an article. And I'm not here to point out anything except the inequalities, just as you said. One of the cases, I'm not sure, you may have already spoken about this, Case in Allison. Are you familiar with Case in Allison, who was 18 years old here in Texas, and he stabbed his classmate to death in a high school restroom, and he got a lesser charge, a criminally negligent homicide, and sentenced him to 10 years, the maximum for that charge. And then I got a lot of messages saying he was going to appeal it. Of course, Kaysen is white and 18, and he got 10 years. So when we're talking about the inequalities, that's kind of a case that came to mind. And I just wanted to see if you would say that that's something that we could equate this case to.
I haven't dug into the details of that case. Please text that one to me so I can look into it. But yeah, so there's I want you all to remember that majority of people that are involved in these cases are on your ballots. So when we talk about voting all the way down, this is part of why. District attorneys in Texas on your ballot, judges on your ballots. So everyone in that room is an elected official. Okay. And so we elect them because we elect them in part because we trust their discretion. So there's prosecutorial discretion that goes into these decisions. So that prosecutor, that DA for that county got to decide this was going to be a first degree murder case. The other thing I will tell you this, and I haven't gotten to dig into his case too much, into that case, but one of the things too, this is not to blame Carmelo because Carmelo was young, but one of the things that also happened where they were able to use first degrees because Carmelo was an honest kid who quickly talked to the police. He talked to friends, and they were able to use all those statements to go to his intent. And so this is part of why we tell you as lawyers, do not talk to the police. Even when you are well intentioned, you are a good person, you were sorry for what happened, and you want to express that remorse, that can and will be used against you. And so this is part of why it didn't matter if Carmelo got in the stand or not, because they already had these statements that they twisted to use to show intent. So one of the differences in this case, for the case that you just mentioned, I'd be interested to see what that kid said to the police after he was arrested. Because if he didn't say anything, that's one of the other challenges. They had nothing to they had to make some assumption about intent or use some other things to figure out his intent because he didn't say anything. And so one of the things that we keep we're sharing as a community, unfortunately, there's always hard lessons in these cases. And unfortunately for us, we only can control ourselves, and it's an unfair burden to put on young Black kids to have to navigate life differently because these systems are not meant for them. But it's a reminder that that's one of the reasons why they were able to charge first degree is because of the statements he made. And so if I had to guess without looking at that case, one of my guesses would probably be that there probably weren't too many statements made by that kid after he was arrested.
That's interesting, and I'll send it to you. I'm not a lawyer, and I tell everybody that I'm just a dumb, content
You're
creator.
not done. You're not done.
It's just meaning, like, I'm not qualified to make these, these legal kind of, statements like that somebody like you. So I would be happy to send that to you. Now I think a lot of people may have a misconception about an appeal, and I think maybe you could set that straight because I've tried to do that in my article, and then I want to follow that up with because it's going to be obviously about evidence, like new evidence has to be submitted, old evidence cannot be retried. It's not a retrial. I have some follow up questions about that. So could you just clarify to people that may not understand what the appeal process for this would look like?
I always want to manage expectations about appeals. So, and I'm holding my phone. I'm in an empty room of my friend's new house over here. So that's part of why you hear this echo. So imagine that my hand is a triangle. And the bottom of the triangle is the trial level. You see that part of the triangle is bigger. Each level on appeals process gets smaller and smaller because your chances of getting off, being found not guilty, having the case overturned get smaller and smaller and smaller the higher up you go. And this is part of one of the reasons why I don't really talk about appeals a lot online because I don't want to give people a false sense that like, oh, this is going to happen, it's going to change anything. Appeals are very, very, very difficult. The other challenge is you have to preserve the record. And so you have to, if you feel like there was error in the court, you have to challenge that while in the hearing, while in the trial, in order to be able to use that later. It's really difficult to use that later. The other thing, there's a lot of conversation about whether his attorney was good or not, his attorney was a problem and things like that. I do think his attorney had blind spots to race. He's a white man, so it's not his lived experience. There's no Black lawyer that would have got up there and not mentioned race. That race and I'm a Black kid who grew up in the Houston suburbs. How his experience and his fear, I absolutely believe it was tied to his experiences. This is me speaking from my opinion, having grown up in a kind of an environment similar to that. This is tied to you being the only kid in this place. These Black kids are often there's some trauma tied to that. And so when you don't have a lawyer who understands that or an expert that understands that gets that can be part of the problem. But anyway, so people are saying, okay, can he get ineffective assistance of counsel? So he had a bad lawyer. The reality is this: that is a very, very, very high standard to meet. Your lawyer almost has to be asleep in the trial in order for that to be effective, like knocked out, not paying attention, in order that to be effective. They give a lot of leeway to a lot of leeway to trial strategy. You could have a you may pick the bad strategy, but they're going to give you a lot of grace with that. And so in this instance, I think he had a strategy of going for less, including less information, doing less witnesses and all that. And I think part of that strategy was that he was trying to block opening the door to something that I think would have been negative to his client. And so that's part of why I don't think they're going to be able to get ineffective assistance of counsel. The appellate courts also give a lot of deference to the trial court and the jurors because they recognize all I'm doing is reading a transcript. I can't assess body language. I can't assess what it felt like in that courtroom and all these other factors. They give a lot of deference. They really trust the jurors and they're them taking that oath. And so that's also part of why it's difficult. Now we have not seen the full trial transcript yet. There weren't cameras in the courtroom, so there could be some errors that just weren't covered by media. So we don't know that yet. And I imagine those transcripts are out. We're gonna have I would tell you, look for those appellate lawyers who really dig into it versus the online law and order people, law and order lawyers when those transcripts come out, because it is going to be like of lawyering, a very particular group of people that focus on this kind of stuff.
And just a real quick side note, who, when you say an appellate lawyer that we should be listening to, could you name a couple that you trust or that we should check out?
I can't think of one right now, but but I can read it when they get to post it. We'll know. It'll be pretty clear who is he's better at. One I can think of, and she's not an appellate lawyer, but she's a criminal defense lawyer. Her page is her name is Erin. She was one of the defense attorneys in the Julio Fulio case for the young girl that was included. She was dating one of the guys who actually committed the murder, and they tried to get her on a conspiracy charge. And so Erin's Instagram, her social media page is like E.S. Wired or something like that. Message me and I can send you all the page. But Erin made a really good point too. People are now saying that, oh, he should have a black lawyer. Carmelo should have had a black lawyer. We need an aggressive lawyer who would do all these different things. And just a few months ago, Aaron and her legal team that fought this Julio Fulio case were dragged online for being zealous advocates for their client, and they were right. And so that's the other thing is when people are saying we need these like really strong black lawyers, when we have those lawyers whose videos go viral, they often get attacked, not just by outsiders, by the actual black community as well.
And that's unfortunate. And my follow-up question to this is, I'm not sure if you saw the video. There was I guess Austin Metcalf's dad, Jeff Metcalf. He went live with a streamer, I guess, for a couple of hours. I believe the whole stream is on X, and it was 3 hours long. And for those people that say this was not about race and that he's a grieving father, like I've known people that have been tragically affected by murder, and I can safely say that nobody ran to some of the things that this dad said. Were you able to see those clips? And if you have any if thoughts on those, about like some of the things he said, because I think Austin Austin was a child for most of the time he was alive, right? Like he's 18 years old, and he was raised with that vitriol. I feel that is generationally instilled in people. So I just wanted to know if you saw it. If so, what your thoughts are.
I did not. I have avoided some of those. I like to stay in a little bubble, which I know people are like, "But you have to watch it," and
No,
no,
don't.
I didn't want to, and I give very limited grace to people who are grieving, but I also know that people are attention seekers and all these different things. There's all this different attention on this case now. So I have not watched it. I don't know how I would grieve the tragic loss of a child, and so I've really stayed away from my assessment of how that family is moving.
And that's totally fair to say. And like I said, I'm very sensitive to those that are grieving, both the people that have been affected by this verdict, and somebody who's lost a child. So there are sensitivities there. So I never expect anything of anybody to be watched or anything. Abiola, who I love to pieces, is asking, would it be fair to say that the strategy then of the council was not effective or was not the right approach?
I think it's so hard to say. It's we don't know, we don't know. So we don't have a lot of like the trial records yet. And my guess is that his strategy was couched on trying to prevent some particular evidence from coming in. And my guess is whatever that evidence is that had came in, my guess is that people will be critiquing him for that. Here's the reality. This is listen, y'all know why I say on this, and it's so funny. I'm being dragged for supporting Carmelo, but I'm gonna give some realities here. The reality is this was a really hard case. There was bad facts for this case. The fact that the statements he made to the police were gonna be really hard to kind of work around. There's no video, which also to my inclination was that these kids, they love a fight video.
Yeah.
This had happened very fast or their bags with their phones weren't near them. But the fact there was no video, I thought was just really. And people like, oh, there is none. There's not like, there may be something, but there's nothing that's like a real definitive video, which we typically get today. We get these very definitive videos. So that was not a great fact. The fact that he had the weapon with him, they tried to imply that involved intent, like that he was coming there looking for a fight kind of thing. So there's all these different pieces this lawyer had to deal with. And then there's the piece of race. And so when I talk about the race here, to me, with that, I think that plays into his mentality and his fear. And while that fear may not have been enough to justify self defense, it can get to me. I think it gives more to the idea of being reckless and perhaps more of a manslaughter case. This is just me talking, not a criminal defense attorney. This is just how my mind went with this. So I caution saying ineffective at this juncture because I have not seen the file. Now, one error that and I'm interested to see what this transcript shows, but one error they keep talking about is that he may have, there's the penultimate question, you cannot ask a witness. So that's a really clear objection. So if it's like, do you think that Joe murdered Bob? You can't really ask them that. That's a question for the jury to determine. And so you don't really can't do that. So there are apparently the kids that were testifying that were witnesses to this were asked questions that were kind of framed in that way. And I do believe there was an objection, which means it was preserved for appeal. But we'll see what that looks like. The other thing is it does that like, okay, yeah, they could say like that, yeah, that was wrong, but it didn't change the outcome. A good example of appeals, kind of thinking about how appeals work, the Murdoch trial, the uh uh the South Carolina murder case. Lower court said, yeah, what that lady did was wrong. She did interfere with the jury, but we don't think it impacted the decision. And so that's something that happens. And then it went up higher, and they said that that's just too big of a thing for us to ignore. So I'm just mentioning all those different examples. So for me, losing, getting a not guilty verdict, especially when you have facts like this in this case, I'm not inclined to say that means the person was ineffective at their job. I don't know enough at this juncture to say that is what I would say.
Okay, and this is one that I keep getting in my DMs, and like I said, I'm not a law person. I just went to school out here. I grew up in Houston, Houston suburbs, just like you. Everybody had a pocket knife. Like I went to a school where we had pocket knives come out daily. Like there were fights every single day at my middle school. Unfortunately, the one that I went to. Um, there has been a big discussion about the legality of having a pocket knife on you. I was wondering, there's a difference between what you can have on you, I guess, on a school grounds versus criminally. So I just wanted to see if you could shed some light on that because I just don't know enough to answer that question.
The knife he had was not illegal. That's the big thing there. Um, and I can't think of what type of law this is, but those are prohibited at schools. I don't know if that I can't tell you if that's a crime or not. I forget myself. But the knife he had, like you and I could carry a knife that size and it would not be illegal. That's not a crime.
But we couldn't have it, like you're saying, on a school campus. We'd
At
get in
school.
trouble.
Yeah, and I think there's also this gray area of like school campuses versus like a track and like how do those things apply?
Got you. I mean, I just whenever I keep hearing that, all I can think about is, like I said, it's not that it's a good thing that people were fighting at my schools every week, but there were rivaling gangs and people brought pocket knives, and I was just like, I just remember everybody having one, and all of a sudden, and I mean everybody, I mean the white kids, I mean the brown kids, I mean everybody, right? So I was just wondering about that, and I also want to thank you for your time. Like I said, I'm very sensitive because this is a hard verdict. Again, it's just like one thing after the next that Black communities, especially here in Texas, have to face. And those that are mothers, especially, I know that this is really tough on them. I have a couple of friends that are moms, and they have sons, and this is a reality that their son is going to have to face one day of like how much more grown and how much more policed their actions will be than their colleagues. So I want to thank you for your time and just ask if there's anything else before we end this, like if you want to add that.
I will tell you another thing that is a really big thing I would encourage people to research, the adultification of Black children.
Right.
And so there is it's all throughout schools. It's a long studied issue, which would have been great to have a scholar or expert on that on the stand. But essentially, Black children are not seen as children. So when they make a mistake that other kids are told, like, oh, that's just Billy, just, he's a kid or whatever, Black kids are not given that grace. And so, and we see that here. One of the comparisons I've made, there's this kid at Texas Tech who was caught gambling underage, gambling on his previous schools, gambling on their game, which is prohibited by the NCAA. We have Ken Paxton, our attorney general, out here fighting to get that guy to be able to play at Texas Tech. I
Okay.
think it's crazy for are you not busy? You got to sit, are you not busy? And so I make that point. Gambling is nowhere near a murder. Like that's very, very different. I'm not comparing the two, but I make that point. So I want you to see how Kim Paxton is giving this kid grace. And I'm calling him a kid intentionally, but I do think he's a kid. He's a kid to me. He's giving him grace. He made a mistake. He's learned. He's out here working to teach the next generation. Let's work to ensure that he does not have to suffer consequences for his actions. Black kids are not given that kind of grace. They're not. They're seen as adults. They're seen as, and they're held to an adult standard. And that's what I thought happened in this court. They held Carmelo Anthony to the standard of a 30-year-old, a 35-year-old who's not yet regulating their emotion. His frontal lobe is not fully developed. He's still learning emotion regulation. And I'm not excusing what happened because I don't think self-defense is very challenging with the eye for an eye kind of piece. Like it's like Jasmine Crockett explained it perfectly. You punch, I punch. And so when you escalate the use of force, you have to be able to justify that. And so I think that's one of the challenges they had as well. But I want people to be mindful of that. Like when we're talking about they didn't give this kid grace and all that. This is the issue. There's an adultification of Black children. They don't get to be children. They're not seen as children in our court systems, in our family services systems, none of that.
Would you have a book or anything where people may be looking at, like, how do I start this journey? Do you have a suggestion on how they start that journey?
Um, one book I'd recommend that I think probably really goes to Carmelo Anthony's experience. Why are all the Black kids sitting together at the cafeteria table? It's a book I read in college on sociology, and it talks about how isolating it can be for Black kids in these white suburban schools. And I think that's something that really could have brought in and humanized him in his experience about why this 6'2" kid from another school coming at him and pushing him saying he didn't belong, why that was a big trigger for him. And I think that's probably the trigger for a lot of us that grew up in those schools, like knowing what that's like when you are excluded, partly because you're Black.
Yeah. Not the same experience, obviously, because there is a certain privilege immigrants have, I believe, sometimes immigrant families have over definitely the Black community. But I thank you for recommending that, and thank you for doing always all the work. If you are a Houstonian, I think Erica has one of the best, most analytical brains in Houston when it comes to local strategies, state races, things like that, and I just wanted to thank you for your time. I know it wasn't an easy topic, but thank you for your time and your expertise. And I hope if you feel like it, you should come back sometime, hopefully on a lighter and more celebratory note. Maybe we'll catch a win here somewhere.
Absolutely, we should. All right.
Well,
You have a
go
great Friday.
you too. Take care, everybody.